Evan Mazza here, back for another edition of MazzaOnSports. It's been a week, so I figured jump in real quickly to talk about the whole. We got a lot to get into. Obviously, I was hoping to do the show on Wednesday. That unfortunately, I got packed up with things. I was hoping to do Friday again. Got packed up, so I got busy. So we're here on a Sunday night at midnight, close to midnight here on the East Coast, and figured jump in do and figured to jump in quickly before for a quick show before coming back on. Hopefully on I'm going again. Going to go for Wednesday. I'm gonna make try to make Wednesdays my show days from here on out. Um, but I wanted to jump in. Obviously, a lot happened this week, and a lot happened, of course, in NFL free agency. Obviously, we're coming off the MLB, or I should say, the World Baseball Classic game from the Team USA against Team Dominican Republic. Team USA defeated Team Dominican Republic 2-1. We'll get to that game in a moment, but first, I wanted to talk about everything that was transpired over the course of free agency in the NFL, and we have to get into the Ravens, the Baltimore Ravens, Maxx Crosby saga. When we last jumped on here, we all thought, or I thought, everyone thought Maxx Crosby was a Baltimore Raven. We all thought he was a Baltimore Raven. We all thought the Baltimore Ravens traded 2 first-round draft picks for Maxx Crosby. We all thought that Maxx Crosby was made shift for Baltimore, and they were going to print out those Ravens jerseys, and it was going to be a big old party. The Baltimore Ravens would have gotten the best pass rusher on the market, at least available in free agency and or trade. They had made one of the most unprecedented big, in terms of spending, in terms of trading away resources kind of thing, and getting the kind of player. The Ravens have literally never made a trade like that ever in their franchise's history. And they made that trade to get Maxx Crosby. They made that trade, and they lit the NFL by storm. No one saw it coming. No Ravens fan sure saw that coming, with the Baltimore Ravens traded 2 first-round picks to get a guy. And they were going to get Maxx Crosby, one of the best defensive players in the game, one of the best players in the game, one of the best pass rushers in the game, you name it. Maxx Crosby was set to become a Baltimore Raven until he wasn't. On Tuesday, he's in the building. And sure enough, he's in the Ravens building in Owings Mills. He's getting his physical. And sure enough, we get that notification from the Las Vegas Raiders, their social media account, that says the Baltimore Ravens have backed out of the trade. The Baltimore Ravens backed out of the trade. Apparently he shows up to Owings Mills. He takes his physical. And the Ravens, again, like I said before in the last show, you did trade for a guy who was coming off meniscus surgery. They saw his physical. They didn't like what they saw, and they decided not to pass the physical, and they backed out of the trade and got their draft picks back. And that notification from the Las Vegas Raiders on Tuesday late Tuesday afternoon, or Tuesday evening, I should say, that set the NFL world by storm, and that got everybody talking, because it was again, the league had just started, the new league year had just begun, free agents were signing everywhere. Or I'm sorry, the new league year was to begin the next day. The new league year was set to begin shortly the next day later, on Wednesday. The Ravens back out of the trade on Tuesday. And the NFL is now, Maxx Crosby is now, all of a sudden, just like that, Maxx Crosby is now is back to being with the Las Vegas Raiders. And the Baltimore Ravens have 2 first-round picks again. And no one and everyone then scrambles and scrambles and scrambles to find out exactly what happened. They scramble and scramble and scramble to find out exactly what happened. Whatever the case may be, again, we've had now, it's Sunday, we've had close to a week to analyze what happened or to determine what happened. I'm sure we'll get more and more as the months go on about why the Ravens backed out of the trade, what led to Maxx Crosby all of a sudden going from the Baltimore Ravens and saying goodbye to the Raiders and saying hello, Ravens Nation or Flock Nation, whatever he said, to all of a sudden he's back with the Raiders. The Ravens say no to the trade. They get their picks back, and Maxx Crosby's putting out a tweet that says, I'm back with the Raiders. I'm all in on the Raiders, all that stuff. And now the Raiders bring in Maxx Crosby to a team that already has the number 1 overall pick, and they're set to draft Fernando Mendoza. And they sign all these players in free agency. They, of course, signed Tyler Linderbaum to a deal in free agency. And off topic, the free agency moves I'm going to get into on Wednesday. We'll just do a full breakthrough on some of the NFL free agency moves and trades overall. But I wanted to talk about this topic in particular because this was the big story of the entire free agency, first week of free agency around the NFL, around the first week of free agency. This was, again, so many things were said about how this deal went down and what happened. No one really knows for sure. There's been different stories. I can only give you my personal opinion on it. I said before in the last show that Eric DeCosta, this wasn't a trade that he would usually make. And I know that because Ozzie Newsome taught him. He would not make a trade like that, Eric DeCosta. Ozzie certainly didn't. I mean, the closest he maybe did was trading a first-round pick to go up to acquire in 2004 to go up to acquire in the 2003 draft Kyle Bowler. It left the Ravens without a 2004 draft pick because he traded that first-round pick to get Kyle Bowler. He used it to trade up to get Kyle Bowler in 2003. The partner he used it was the New England Patriots, and the Patriots used that 2004 draft pick they acquired from the Baltimore Ravens to get Vince Wilfork. Worked out pretty well for the Patriots, didn't work out very well for the Ravens in drafting Kyle Bowler. But this was not something Eric DeCosta usually does, but this wasn't a normal offseason for the Ravens. You fired your head coach of 18 years in John Harbaugh. He goes to the New York Giants. Your entire coaching staff, minus Anthony Levine, and maybe 1 or 2 other people, gone. New coaching staff, new head coach, and your owner, Steve Bisciotti, goes out there and has this big press conference and essentially says, we got to win a championship with Lamar Jackson. And we'll talk about that contract again on Wednesday. We'll talk about what the Ravens did on Wednesday with Lamar Jackson. But Steve Bisciotti said, we need to win a championship. It was essentially you could point out the whatever reasons you want to point out to why they fired John Harbaugh. The number one reason they did, and the only reason they did, really, truthfully, the only true reason why they fired him was because he didn't win a Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson in 8 years. That's the only reason. If he would have won the Super Bowl in 2019 when they were 14-2, number 1 seed, he'd be the head coach right now. If they won the Super Bowl in 2023 when they won 13 games and the number 1 seed home for the advantage, just like in 2019, he'd be the head coach right now. It's the only real reason. But Steve Bisciotti called up John Harbaugh in the middle when Harbaugh was on his way home from work and fired him because of that. Because the team had a disappointing 8-9 season. They had gone 8 years without a championship with Lamar Jackson, a quarterback. He felt that he had to fire his head coach to bring in someone new. And he did that. But it was also a message to Eric DeCosta because Steve Bisciotti made that move, not Eric DeCosta. Bisciotti made that move. That was a message to Eric DeCosta. Step up or you're fired too. He definitely put Eric DeCosta on notice. And I think, again, I said it last week, that Steve Bisciotti went to Eric DeCosta and said, I don't care about draft picks this time. You need to get me a big-time player because we got to win a championship right now. And DaCosta, I think, essentially, because of that, was forced to do it. I think he was forced to get a player of Maxx Crosby's caliber. And of course, they needed a big time player. They needed a big time defensive player. They needed a big time pass rusher. They needed a big time any of that on defense. But so he decided to go get the best one available, which was Maxx Crosby. And I think they did it without really truly knowing how serious the knee injury was. I don't really think they did much in terms of their research and in terms of checking the injury history and stuff like that before making the trade. Then Crosby gets into the building. They check out his physicals. I think apparently they had, according to reports, they had about 4 or 5 doctors there. One of them was the Dallas Cowboy doctor. And they didn't like what they saw of his physicals, or at the very least, they weren't comfortable with it. My personal opinion, I don't think they were. I think they could have passed Maxx Crosby. I think they could have passed Maxx Crosby. I think they could have passed him. But they decided, but I think Eric DaCosta found a way out. I think Eric DaCosta said, we could probably pass him, but don't know about the longevity of his knee surgery. Because again, he was coming off a torn meniscus that he suffered last year that he was playing through and had double-digit. Look, because again, Maxx Crosby is a great player. He played through a torn meniscus in 2025 and got double-digit sacks because he's just a great player. But he was coming off a serious knee surgery. It was a knee repair that would unfortunately have him out till about July. And I think the Ravens call it cold feet. I think Eric DaCosta called cold feet, kind of saw a way out to a trade that I don't think he was comfortable making in the first place. So they backed out. I think they could have passed Maxx Crosby, but I think they felt the longevity wasn't worth it. And I also think DaCosta, again, would take his draft picks back. Fair or not fair, business or not business. You can talk about the way they handle things, but this is just, again, I don't think we'll truly know for at least the next couple of months exactly what happened. I'm just giving my personal opinion on what I think happened. I think the Ravens could have easily passed Maxx Crosby and kept him out and see how he rehabbed until July or so in August when he's ready to go. But I think they saw the knee surgery. He's also been a guy who's had other surgeries in the past. In 2024, I think he had to get ankle surgery. That also ended his season in 2024. I think the Ravens, longevity-wise, for at least the long run, weren't comfortable. So they decided, especially not for 2 first-round picks. Maybe if it was, something less than 2 first-round picks, maybe they definitely would have passed him. But I think because it was 2 first-round picks as well, and again, we know the Ravens don't like doing this. We know Eric DaCosta was not taught in doing this in the first place. I think they found a way out to back out of it, tell the Raiders we're not comfortable with this, tell the Raiders, especially before the new league year was set to begin the next day later. The new league year was set to begin the next day later. But it is 100%. It is, I think, 100% the reason why the Ravens said no. This isn't worth 2 first-round picks. We probably could pass him, but the knee surgery and what we're seeing, maybe he could be productive for the next 2 to 3 or so years, but maybe not 4 or 5 years, 6 years. We're not comfortable with that, and we're not comfortable with giving up 2 first-round picks for it. So we're gonna rescind the trade. Fair or not? And look, I'm not even saying that the rest of the league doesn't have a reason to be a little bit teed, a little bit ticked off at the Ravens, because of course some of them are going to, because of course all of them, if not all, are going to call what on that. And I think I can't really blame them, but I think that's just what the Ravens did. I think the Ravens just saw his physicals, they saw his physical. They saw it. They weren't comfortable giving up 2 first-round picks for it. And I also think Eric DaCosta, I don't think he wanted to make that move in the first place. I just think he was forced to make it because of the owner and because of Steve Bisciotti. So he did it. So he made the trade because he wanted to please his boss. And he's also on the hot seat. Eric DaCosta is on the hot seat this year. If Harbaugh got fired, guess what? DaCosta's probably next. If the Ravens underachieve next season, or if They have it disappointing if they go in the playoffs, getting beat in the first round or so. Eric DeCosta could very well be fired at the end of next season. His job, he's on notice. His seat is warm, if not on the hot seat entirely. He has to win now, or the Ravens will be looking for the first time in their history, they'll be looking for a GM outside the building, or a president of football operations outside the building. They've had two, Ozzie, David Modell, and Eric DeCosta. That's been the guys, who have been in charge of GM, player personnel, president of football operations. That's who they've had. They've all been inside, all been in the building. I think Steve Bisciotti told Eric DeCosta, you got to get me somebody, and I don't care about draft picks. And I think DeCosta probably was not comfortable making the move anyway. So the trade I think because of all that, the trade gets rescinded. It's backed out. The Raiders now have Maxx Crosby. They don't have 2 first-round picks now. They only have the number 1 overall pick now in this year's draft. They don't have 2 first-round picks in this year's draft, which they could have used the draft for Fernando Mendoza and whoever to help him out. And then next year to continue to build around the team. So they don't have that, but they do get back Maxx Crosby. At least we think they'll have him back. And the Ravens now get 2 first-round draft picks. And because you knew they had to pivot. And you knew that because, again, DeCosta's on the hot seat, he's got to still go out and please the owner and get the owner the pass rusher that this team needs. So he goes out and gives a 4-year, $112 million contract to the best free agent pass rusher available, keyword free agent entirely pass rusher available, and Trey Hendrickson. The Baltimore Ravens get Trey Hendrickson on a 4-year, $112 million deal literally the next day later, which again raises even more questions to the whole saga with Maxx Crosby and why they backed out of the trade. Reports were they were talking to Hendrickson during Maxx Crosby's visit, which is okay. That's a little weird. And then Eric DeCosta and other, was like, well, and I think other reports like, well, we were trying to pair him up with Maxx Crosby. We're trying to get both Crosby and Hendrickson. And that one in particular, I don't buy. I don't buy that one in particular. The whole when Eric DeCosta says, oh, we were trying to get both Crosby and Hendrickson, I don't buy that. I don't buy that at all. I don't think that's true at all. I've seen people report that, but this is me again personally. I don't buy it. First of all, where's the money to fit that in your cap space? Number one, you're already tight in the cap. Number one. Number two, you already have Mike Green. You drafted him in the second round of last year, and he had a nice rookie season, but you have him in the second round last year. You're going to just sit him on the bench for the next 3 years, and then he's going to leave in free agency to become a starter. So you're going to have 2 players. Again, we'll get to Hendrickson in a second fully, but you'll have 2 players on the other each end coming off injured seasons, coming off surgery. One is getting close to 30, while the other one is going to be 32. And those are going to be your guys also on the edge, both sides. I don't know. Again, I don't see that. And again, the money, cap, flexibility, I don't know where you fit that. And again, Mike Green. But so I don't really buy that whole thing that they were trying to sign both of them. I think that they rescinded the trade, and after they rescinded the trade with Crosby in the building, they immediately got on the phone with Trey Hendrickson and tried to work out a deal because they had to get a pass rusher because they could not leave without a pass rusher after the Crosby thing went sideways. They couldn't leave free agency without one. And of course, like I said, DeCosta's on the hot seat. He needs to get a pass rusher. He's been put on notice by the owner. By Steve Bisciotti. He has to get a move. So you go out and you give $112 million to Trey Hendrickson. And obviously, again, we'll talk about about this on Wednesday, but the Ravens got $40 million in cap space from a Lamar Jackson restructure, not an extension. Key phrase, not an extension. We'll talk more about that on Wednesday. But even still, they pivot to Trey Hendrickson. Look, for the Ravens side and for the Ravens on the field, good on them for pivoting and getting Trey Hendrickson. don't get it twisted. Trey Hendrickson is still a really good football player. He's not the defensive player that Maxx Crosby is, obviously. He's not the player that Maxx Crosby is, obviously. He's more of a pure pass rusher. Maxx Crosby is a complete player. He can rush the passer, he can stop the run, he can do it all. Hendrickson is more of a premier pass rusher. He's not a guy who stops the run particularly well. Now, how does that factor in the pass happy NFL? Again, we'll see, but you still need to stop the run. And the Baltimore Ravens pride themselves on defense and stopping the run. They pride themselves in it. So Trey Hendrickson, I think the Ravens would like to see him be better at stopping the run, but he is more of a pure passer. This is a guy who had 17 sacks in 2023 and 2024. He is a pure pass rusher. But the one thing with him is that he is 32. He's going to be 32. He's had injuries, and he's coming off a hip surgery, or at least core muscle surgery, just this past offseason. So he's another one, just like Crosby, that's coming off surgery. Now, they did pass him. They passed his physical, but he is coming off hip surgery or core muscle surgery. He's coming off surgery, just like Maxx Crosby is. So, and he only played 7 games last year for the Bengals. He missed 10. And like I said, he's 32, or he's going to be 32. So there is, just like with Crosby with the Ravens when they were trying to make that trade, there is risk with Trey Hendrickson. There is a risk with him. But they had to make a pivot. They had to pivot, and they had to get Hendrickson, because if this whole thing with Crosby would have gone bust and the Ravens come out with nothing, it would have looked really bad, especially for a team that's in so much pressure to win and a GM that's under a lot of pressure right now. And you could even see it again, like I mentioned before, you could see it again with DaCosta at the presser that Bisciotti had back in January. You can see it again because he went out there in his presser with the media after the Crosby trade didn't go down, after the Crosby trade, after they rescinded it. He met with the press, and again he looked like he looked a little defeated. Now again, they had signed Trey Hendrickson, but he did look a little bit down. He looked defeated. He looked upset that the Crosby trade didn't work out, and he looked like a guy who knows he's under a lot of pressure, and he is. DaCosta's under a lot of pressure right now. With Harbaugh no longer there, the onus now truly falls on Eric DaCosta. And I think he's a great GM. I think he's a top 5 GM in the league, and I think it was a good job by him to pivot to get Trey Hendrickson. And I also think he made some other nice moves in free agency. Again, we'll talk more about that on Wednesday. But he's under a lot of pressure. He has to win. So to pivot to get Trey, that's a good move. You just hope that he stays healthy, his play doesn't falter, and you hope that his ability to get after the quarterback and be that great pure pass rusher offsets the fact that he can't really stop the run well. So that's what you got to hope for. But this whole saga with Crosby was mind-boggling, baffling, just unbelievable. I do think the Ravens could have passed him. I just think they got a little bit of cold feet in terms of longevity, in terms of the long term of Maxx Crosby as a Raven, and with the surgeries he's had, and with this knee surgery especially. Do I think Crosby's going to come out and try to have a huge year with the Raiders or whoever? Sure. Sure, definitely. Do I think the Ravens are still a good football team with Trey Hendrickson, or at least a good defense still, or gotten better on defense with Trey Hendrickson there? Yes. Do I think they are better with Hendrickson than they are with Crosby? Of course not. No, Crosby's the better player. So, but I still think they're better on defense today than they were, say, before the offseason began in terms of the pass rush department. Do I think they got improved in terms of the player-wise? Sure. No, I don't think so, because, again, Crosby's the better player. Do I think it helps the Ravens that they got not only Hendrickson, but the 2 first-round picks back? Yeah, of course. Of course. I think them keeping the first-round picks, I would not really have traded the first-round picks to begin with. I was kind of hesitant on the trade. I understood why they made the trade. I understood the pressure. I understood the mindset that they had, or at least that Steve Bisciotti had, but I would have kept those draft picks, because again, the Baltimore Ravens win by building through the draft. That's how they win. Some Ravens fans might not like it, but that's how they usually win. They build through the draft. And again, as great as Crosby is, it still is, there was that concern I had with the injury, and I still share that same concern about Trey Hendrickson. I still share that same concern. It's just that I'm not trading 2 first-round picks to get him, but I am paying him a lot of money. The Ravens are paying him a lot of money. 4 years, $112 million. But this whole saga was a roller coaster. The thrills of Maxx Crosby to the woes of now all of a sudden you don't have him, to, oh, cool, okay, we got Trey Hendrickson. But it has set the NFL world by storm. It's something we're going to be talking about for months. I'm sure we'll find out more about it. There have been so many reports that have come out. But and again, there are questions about how the Ravens handled it. I think also with the fact that he was in the building when this whole thing was going on, I think also didn't really help. But I think that's also how it goes. This is just a situation that I think, do I think it makes the Ravens look particularly great? Was the optics, right? Did the optics make the Ravens look particularly great? No, probably not. And I think a lot of the league is not very happy about this whole thing, because they probably feel like the Ravens could have passed him. And I actually believe that too. I think the Ravens could have passed him. But I think they decided for the long term, with Crosby's injury history and the long-term ramification of his injury and his injury history, I think the Ravens said, I don't think so. I think we'll take our 2 first-round picks back. Or I should say, Eric DeCosta said that. But still, this whole thing, I think, could have easily been avoided if the Ravens just didn't trade for him. If you just didn't trade for him, none of this would have gone down, but it did. And like I said, I think they were forced to trade for him because Steve Bisciotti was implement on trading for him or getting a big-name premier player like him, because they got to win now. So the bottom line is this: the Baltimore Ravens did not get Maxx Crosby. Trey Hendrickson is a Baltimore Raven. He is now their guy. And Maxx Crosby, as far as we know, is still a Las Vegas Raider. Will he be a Las Vegas Raider come September? Who knows? Will he be a Las Vegas Raider after the draft? Who knows? But as far as we know, today on now it's past midnight here on the East Coast, so it's really technically March 16th. So really March 16th. He is still a Raider. Will he be a Raider come draft day? Who knows? But as of today, he is a Raider. So, but what a crazy roller coaster this was. What a crazy roller coaster this was. And, in terms of the opinion that I've seen people say about the teams not going to be wanting to trade with the Ravens after this whole thing, do I think Eric DeCosta's reputation took a bit of a hit in this whole thing? I think so. I think his reputation did take a bit of a hit here. Do I think it's going to avoid teams from trading for him or trading with the Ravens and with DeCosta? I actually don't think so. Here's the thing with sports, and here's the thing with sports, and here's the thing with the rest of the NFL. If you can give them a good trade, they'll say yes to the trade. And in the NFL especially, these teams have short memories, But I do think that, it might affect DeCosta right now, but come draft day next month, when teams call the Ravens up about trading draft picks, Are they going to think about Maxx Crosby? No, of course not. When Eric DeCosta calls up teams about offering to trade his draft picks or whatever, trade up, trade down the draft, or even trade a player for draft picks, do I think these teams are gonna say, "Oh, Maxx Crosby," and hang up the phone? No, they're gonna listen. And if there's a good trade between both the Ravens and the teams, of course they're going to agree to the trade. That's just how the league works, and that's just how sports work. So it hasn't stopped. It hasn't stopped. I mean, the New England Patriots during the Belichick years had a lot of stuff and didn't stop teams from trading with them, right? So I don't think it's going to stop. So just because of this whole Crosby thing, I don't think it's going to stop teams from trading with the Ravens. Excuse me. So, especially if there's a good trade that they think is going to benefit both teams. So, no, I don't think it'll affect them. But overall, this was a roller coaster ride. This was a roller coaster ride that ended with Maxx Crosby back on the Raiders and the Ravens landing Trey Hendrickson. We'll see how the season plays out because it's going to be interesting, right? If Maxx Crosby is great with the Raiders and Hendrickson's struggling and the Ravens maybe are not really winning games or they're at least 500, because I still think the Ravens are going to be better than the Raiders, obviously. I still think the Ravens will be better than the Raiders. But if Crosby's having a big year and Hendrickson isn't, and maybe the Ravens are maybe at least 500 or whatever, or they're still having trouble with pass rush, teams look at that and people will go, look at that. But if Hendrickson is having a big year and Crosby is battling injuries and the Ravens are winning, then this will look great for the Ravens. It will look great. So, but time will tell. But this whole thing, again, I think we're going to find out more about in the next few months, especially towards draft day or post-draft, etc. Because it certainly was interesting, right? The Ravens trade 2 first-round picks. They make a move that they literally have never made ever in their history. And all of a sudden, and they knew he had knee surgery. They knew he played a season with a torn meniscus. They knew he had a history of injuries and surgeries. And you traded 2 first-round picks for him anyway. You brought him in, saw the physical, and were like, I don't know. I think we'll take our 2 first-round picks back. It's a very wacky thing. My personal opinion, again, I'll reiterate, I think the Ravens could have passed him. I just think they saw the physicals and they didn't like the long-term effects. They didn't like maybe they thought about year 4, year 5, year 6 for Crosby. And they said, we'll take our first-round picks back. And we'll go sign that Trey Hendrickson guy. Fair or not fair, I think that's how their business was. So, but we'll find out. But certainly they did get better in terms of their pass rush department. Trey Hendrickson being a Raven, they did get better in terms of the pass rush. Did they get better in terms of being of better football, of overall defense? No, because like I said, Crosby's a better player. But again, Hendrickson is a really good player in his own right, and he's a pure pass rusher. So either way, just a really roller coaster situation, a really roller coaster turn of events, of Crosby being a Raven to him not being a Raven to him going back to the Raiders, and then Trey Hendrickson goes from the Cincinnati Bengals to the Baltimore Ravens, and now he'll play the Bengals 2 times a year after the whole 2025 saga that he had, or at least 2024 and 2025 saga that he had with the Bengals. So we'll dive in more on Wednesday about NFL free agency and the moves that were made and some moves that the Ravens made and other teams made. I'll tell you who I think won, I'll tell you who I think not won or lost, but I'll tell you who I think did well in free agency and who I think could have done better in free agency, or at least the first week or so of free agency. I'm sure more moves will be made in week 2 of free agency. I'm sure more moves will be made in the coming days. There's still obviously other free agents still out there. Someone like guys I can name right away. Someone like Tyreek Hill is still out there in free agency. But we'll talk more about that on Wednesday. I'll talk about the World Baseball Classic. On to the World Baseball Classic. Today's Team USA Dominican Republic game. Like I said at the start of the show, Team USA defeated Team Dominican Republic 2-1. Really good, fun, overall tight game pitching-wise. What pitching was the story here. The 3 runs each was by solo home runs. Junior Campanaro began the game for the Dominican Republic with a solo home run. Then Team USA came in with Gunnar Henderson and Roman Anthony with solo homers, and that was all the offense needed, that Team USA needed. Their pitching settled in, skiing settled in, bullpen was really good. Tyler Rogers came in, David Bednar had a good one, and Mason Miller came out and closed it out. But this was the game. This was a game I felt Team USA was going to win because of their tight pitching, because they had better pitching. Bobby Witt made some great plays defensively. So I felt Team USA had the advantage because of it. The Team Dominican Republic probably had the more power on offense, but Team USA had more versatility and more better defense and better pitching. And I think, not to say the Dominican Republic's pitching was bad. Dominican Republic's pitching was great. Sevi, I thought overall pitched really well. Huáscar Brazoban pitched really well. Their pitching did keep them in this game. The biggest problem was that Team Dominican Republic couldn't hit runners in scoring position. Team USA's pitching was able to hold them with men in scoring position with guys on base. But I think that was the factors of why I felt Team USA was going to win this game. And I think you saw it here. Having said that, that wasn't strike three. The Mason Miller pitch and that was a great at bat. It was, you had a man on third, 2 out. The man on third and 2 outs. I believe it was, trying to remember, I think it was Julio Rodriguez because he worked out a walk. He worked out a leadoff walk against Mason Miller. And Geraldo Perdomo comes to the plate with him on third. Mason Miller and Perdomo go at it. A really good battle that came down to the 8th pitch of the at-bat on a 3-2 count. Perdomo was starting to foul off those fastballs. Those 102 miles an hour fastballs that the Dominican Republic were not catching up to on Mason Miller. He was starting to catch up to those fastballs. He fouled them off a couple of times, Perdomo. It was a really good at-bat. Mason Miller then comes in with the I believe it was the sweeper or the slider, and it was low, but it was a really good pitch. It was a good pitch by Mason Miller, but it was low. That was ball 4, and the umpire called it strike 3. And now that's the story. And that does suck. That the ending of what was a really good game now turns into controversy because of a bad call by the umpire. Instead of the game continuing on and the Team Dominican Republic getting to the top of the order, which would have been first and third and 2 outs, the game is over because of a questionable call. Do I think it was a strike? No. It was a good pitch by Mason Miller. It was a good pitch. It was a really good at-bat by Perdomo. But it wasn't strike 3. 3 things can be true. Good pitch, good at-bat, not a good call. Just not a good call. Is it the reason the Dominican Republic lost? No, it's not the reason. The reason they lost is because they couldn't get the big hit, and Team USA's pitching was able to contain them and hold them to that 1-run lead after the Roman Anthony home run, I believe, off Gregory Soto. But still, was it strike 3? No, wasn't strike 3. And I think there was a similar situation with Juan Soto back in the 7th or 8th inning where it was a pitch low. Might have been lower. It might not have been as low as Perdomo's strike 3, but it was still pretty low and should have been called the ball. But they called it a strike. The umpire called it strike 3. Similar pitch, probably lower than, like I said, a little bit lower. I felt it was ball 4, but the umpire ruled it strike 3. But bottom line is Team USA moves on, and they will move on to the finals to face Team Venezuela on Tuesday night in the World Baseball Classic finale. Again, I'll reiterate, I enjoy the World Baseball Classic. I'm one of them that I love watching it. I do get into it. I have fun with it. But for me, on the other end, though, for me as a Mets fan and as a fan, or just as a particular fan of a team in Major League Baseball, I just knock on wood and hope nobody gets hurt. Especially when it's so close to the beginning of the regular season. For Juan Soto and Huáscar Brazoban, they come in, thankfully, they came out thankfully healthy, and they'll come back to Mets spring training pretty soon, maybe tomorrow or so. And unfortunately for Nolan McLean, because Clay Holmes is out in Port St. Lucie, he has to stick around for the finals. And I hope he pitches well. And I think he might start on Tuesday. I thought I saw before the Classic began that if the Team USA were to get to the finals, he would be lined up as a starter. So obviously it won't be Paul Skeens because he pitched today. Won't be Skubal because he's back in Detroit, or at least he's back in the Tigers camp. But Nolan McLean, I think, could be set, who a lot of people were crapping on after his not so great performance against Italy that led to it, where Italy won. Or excuse me, it's not Venezuela. I'm sorry. My apologies. The winner of the Venezuela. I'm sorry. My apologies. The winner of the Venezuela-Italy game tomorrow. I was already writing off Italy. I'm sorry. I forgot about the Venezuela-Italy game tomorrow night. But the winner of the Venezuela-Italy game tomorrow will face Team USA on Tuesday in the finals. But still, Nolan McLean faced Italy. Not a kind of a performance. Gave up a couple of homers. And he might be lined up to start on Tuesday. So hopefully Nolan McLean can bounce back and have the start that we know he's capable of having against either Team Italy or Team Venezuela. Like I said, I apologize. I apologize. I lost track. Venezuela will play Italy tomorrow night to see who faces Team USA Wednesday. So I apologize for that. So hopefully, we'll see what happens there. I think it'll be interesting because I think both of them have been fun stories. Venezuela pulled off the upset against Japan the other day. Italy defeated Puerto Rico. Italy's been the fun story. Everyone's enjoyed their story. They've had a great Cinderella ride, and they're the only team right now to this point to beat Team USA. My pick for tomorrow night's Venezuela-Italy game, look at me. I was already putting Venezuela in the finals. I will pick Team Venezuela here. I do think Venezuela will beat Italy tomorrow night, and it will be USA versus Venezuela in the finals on Tuesday. But Italy's been a fun story. They've been a very, very fun story, and they've been a fun team to watch. But back to the USA game, Dominican Republic game from tonight, I do think it was ball 4. It was low. Is it the reason Dominican Republic lost? No, but it was a low pitch. But it was a good, fun game. I'm happy that, obviously, as a Mets fan, I'm happy that Juan Soto's coming back to Port St. Lucie. Bronzerbound's coming back to Port St. Lucie. So at least there's that. For Team USA, again, I'll be rooting for Nolan McLean if he's starting, or if he does eventually get into the game, I'll be rooting for him to pitch well and show the audience and show the fans of what Met fans see, that he can be a pretty darn good pitcher. So, because this is a big year for Nolan McLean overall, in terms of the Mets side. Speaking of the Mets, Francisco Lindor returned today in his first spring training action for the Mets. I thought he looked good. Actually, the first at-bat struck out, but the next couple of at-bats, he hit the ball hard. Got a base hit in his last at-bat. Gosh, I think he got about 3 or 4 at-bats in a game you only played 4 innings, because the Mets were hitting around against the Blue Jays today. They won their game 8-1 today. But Lindor, I thought, looked good swinging the bat. He batted all 4 times. I think his at-bats were from the left side of the plate, so he didn't bat from the right side, bat from the left side. But after the first at-bat, I thought he swung the bat really well. He hit the ball hard. He looked good. So it was good to see him. Good to see him back out there. I think, was it 4 or 5 weeks? I think this was after his surgery. I think this was about 4 or 5 weeks after his surgery. The whole expectation was that he'd be back on opening day. Certainly after today, it certainly looks like, or after Sunday, it certainly looks like he will be there on opening day. My thing is this. If he's not 100% healthy, if the Mets are not fully 100% comfortable in Lindor playing right away, then he should sit the first couple of weeks, get back into the thick of things, get 100% healthy, and come back when you're 100%. Here's the thing with Francisco Lindor, and I love him. He's my favorite player on the Mets, and I respect the heck out of him, and I think he's a great player. And he plays every day, no matter what. He's a gamer. He's a leader. He's tough. He wants to play. The man loves to play baseball, and he wants to be there every day for his team. That's just the mindset he has. And he has carried that throughout. He had that in Cleveland. And he has carried that through his, now 5 years with the Mets, right? 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, right? 6 years now. This is now his 6th season as a Met. It's crazy. That's already been 6 years now. He's been with the Mets. And he's played every day. But it's a long 162-game season. It's a long season. It is a marathon, not a sprint. If the Mets feel that he's not 100%, and even if he feels he's not truly 100% by the time opening day comes around next week on Thursday, then you should just hold him out for the first couple of weeks. It's okay. It's only the first couple of weeks of the season. It's a 162-game season. It's March and April. It's okay. Get 100% healthy. Get back out there for your team. But the Mets have been adamant that he'll be there on opening day, and Lindor has been adamant he'll be there on opening day. And I know opening day is the big pageantry, and we all love it, and we all want to be there for the first game and everything. I understand that. But if Lindor just is not truly 100% ready yet, then I think it would have been best for the Mets to hold him out. At least hold him out for the first couple of weeks. But it seems like the Mets are ready to play him the first game of the season. It seems like he's going to be ready to be out there. The first games. Now we'll see how he looks in spring training, at least in the next this is the last week of spring training. This whole week. After this week, we're done with spring training. This upcoming Sunday will be the last spring training game. So these next few spring training games that he does play in, we'll see how he looks then. But I thought today, swinging the bat, he looked good. But we'll see. But we'll see more, I'm sure, in these last couple of spring training games before the regular season begins. And we'll see how he looks. But like I said, if he's not 100% ready, I would not play him opening day. I would not play him opening day. I would let him get his rest. I would let him sit back and just get 100% and let the Mets. And plus, the Mets have all this infield versatility now. All right, if he's not there, you got Bo Bichette. You got other guys. You got other guys you can throw in there. You got Marcus Semien. You got Bo Bichette. You got Brett Beatty. You can mix and match your infield how you want it without Lindor in there for the first couple of weeks. You can do that. So I don't know. So I just hope that when the Mets make this decision and when Lindor makes this decision as we get to opening day, I hope that he's 100% or that they do what they feel is right to keep him healthy for the season because, what's more important is he's out there 100% and not just being out there 70% with a chance where he re-injures his hand or something like that, or he's struggling to begin the season and he's on a big slump. Obviously, we've seen that with Lindor over the past, over his tenure with the Mets, except for last year. But we've seen that in his tenure with the Mets. So, but again, I think the Mets should take their time here and really evaluate how healthy Lindor is and see if he really should be out there opening day. But it really does seem like they're ready to throw him out there next Thursday. So we'll see how healthy he is to begin the season. Because again, 6 weeks removed from the surgery, that's pretty darn quick. So, like I said, on Wednesday, we will talk more about NFL free agency. We'll talk about the World Baseball Classic final on Tuesday night between Team USA and the winner of the Venezuela Italy game tomorrow night. We'll talk a little bit more about Monday Night Raw, and then we have to WrestleMania. We'll recap the AEW Revolution pay-per-view from tonight. It's still going on. A lot to talk about in the AEW Revolution pay-per-view in terms of returns and debuts and such. A lot to talk about. Currently, they're on the main event with Paige and MJF. So a lot to talk about that pay-per-view, but we'll talk about that more on Wednesday. Again, and I'm looking to do my MLB previews, and I'll preview everything in the 2026 MLB season the following, not this Wednesday, but the following Wednesday, I believe that's when the Yankees that night on Wednesday night, the Yankees and the Giants will kick off the season, and then Thursday is everyone else's opening day. So we'll do that. Having said that, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. Have yourselves a great night. I hope you've had a good weekend. Have yourselves a good week. I will see you all on Wednesday, and take care.